What's up, community? Just Jeremy here for another episode of Art of Life Homestead. Today is kind of a big day. We have accomplished part one of our biggest goals for 2021. I'm going to share that with you and show you it in detail here in just a few moments. But first, anyone who's intrigued by the idea of keeping bees or of having bees and has done any research into it may have been scared off by people's experiences with keeping bees. This would be our fourth season keeping bees here, and the first three have been beautiful and interesting, and we've got about at least 4 gallons of honey total, which is barely enough for us. We go through about a pint, or rather about a quart and a half or so a month, because honey is essentially our only sweetener that we use for everything. So anyway, it's for us though, the bees or the honey is just the bonus. That's not why I keep bees. I want to encourage bee development in our eco area for all of the obvious benefits that having bees for all of your planting and pollination and everything like that. Now, we're fortunate enough to live in an area where there are so many different kinds of pollinators that even if there wasn't honeybees here, I think the majority of things would still get pollinated. That being said, I certainly don't. I have no science to back that up. I'm just my own observation. However, back to the bees. Keeping bees in the traditional manner, which is stacking boxes on top of one another that have frames inside of the boxes, that's called the Langstroth hive setup. That configuration has been the standard configuration for well over 100 years. I'm not a fan, and I knew I wasn't a fan after one season of keeping bees. And the primary reason for me not being a fan of them, that Langstroth setup, is you have to get into the bees. A good beekeeper gets into them at least every other week. At least you have to. For one, the bees will excrete propolis, which is wax. They'll seal everything up to a point that you wouldn't be able to get into your frames, and you want to make sure that your queen is doing her job, and the bees are always building up in that setup. And over time, they'll actually abandon the lower comb. As the comb gets darker and darker, the bees will actually stop using it. They'll cap honey on it, and they'll leave that honey. They may go back to it. In the wild, they just build up in the hollow as they go, and then when they run out of room, they swarm, and the majority of the worker bees and the old queen take off, and there's a new queen cell or a new queen bee being born in the old hive, and they get all of the previous brood, all of the eggs that the old queen had laid, and so the cycle continues. But even in a log hollow, which is a traditional honeybee home, there will be surpluses of honey in some cases, depending upon how big the hollow is. I mean, it could be 30, 40, 50 more pounds of honey that just sits in there capped off. In the wild, things that eat honey, like bears, for example, would help themselves to that. But anyway, back to us in our Langstroth box. It comes with a lot of problems. And what I encountered over Christmas has completely changed the way that I think about bees, and it will forever change the way that I keep bees. And that was a lovely little gem of a book called Keeping Bees with a Smile. It's written by a Russian fellow whose name I'm probably going to butcher here. It's Fyodor Lautzin, Lautzin. And Mr. Lautzen did a fantastic service to anyone who is interested in keeping bees by writing this book, because, as the old saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun. He discovered an old way of keeping bees that mimics the log hollow, as opposed to creating this thing that really, at the end of the day, is designed for honey production, for the commercial beekeeper who wants to do lots of, make lots of honey. Now, anyone who has kept bees, especially in regions like ours, we're in USDA Zone 7A, will note that there are a few pest problems that you're going to encounter, primarily being the southern hive beetle, and then also wax moths, which can be a problem. And then finally, which is the bane of every beekeeper's existence that I know, pretty much everywhere, the Varroa Mite, which is essentially a tiny little tick that attaches to the bees, and we can decimate an entire hive. There's also Tracheal Mites, which are an even smaller tick type critter that gets in the in the throat of the bee, and then as it swells, it chokes off the bee's ability to digest food or take in food, and then it dies. And these are fairly new to the beekeeping world in general. I mean, it wasn't a problem that occurred, say, even 50 or 60 years ago. There's a lot of different takes on what is the cause of these things and where they came from. I'm not a scientist. I don't have the studies or anything behind me, but I do have a pretty damn good ability to make sense for myself. And what Mr. Lautzen in his book contends is that it is the way we keep bees, which is so unnatural to the bees' way of doing things, that is encouraging all of this illness, and the fact that we're not keeping bees from our local eco area. People are buying package bees. They're getting queens from a completely different strain. They're basically mix and matching organisms that are not natural to your specific area. And just like cultivars in your garden, if you want a specific kind of fruit or vegetable that to grow in your region, well, you do it over time. You develop it as you watch it for the traits that you're specifically looking for. And bees and even animals, for that matter, are no different. So that being the case, why would I want a bee from Minnesota, say, to be here in Alabama? Well, that's actually the bees that we started off with, which were called Minnesota Hygienics. We actually had a pretty good luck with those bees. Now, that being said, though, those bees are not so much suited to the type of weather conditions that we have here. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to catch a local swarm, or you want to get in touch with a beekeeper from the area who can get you a local swarm. Catching a swarm is actually very easy. There it is in this location. Now, some people might say, yeah, right, okay, buddy, prove it. Oh, okay, I will. So behind me here on this railroad tie, you'll see I have a box. It's that pretty goofy orange because that was the only exterior paint I had at the time. But what I have is a swarm trap. And what's in the swarm trap? Well, as of yesterday, are bees. That's pretty exciting. That's the big goal that I caught here, or that we've achieved. What's in that swarm trap, though, I've actually made a video about that's in the editing process, and God, we may never actually see it because, well, as I said before, I'm not the best video editor, nor do I have the patience for it. But what's in there are 6 frames that had drawn comb on them, and the key to the drawn comb deal is that A, it smells like bees. B, it had these particular frames had a little bit of pollen still in them, which is all the more attractive to the bee. And C, I use a swarm lure, which is amounts to a cotton ball with lemongrass essential oil on it. And the lemongrass oil, I have been told, smells like a bee's kitchen. Okay, when I actually get into my bees, I put lemongrass oil on my gloves, and I even put it around my veil. And the bees that go to it are they're very docile. It puts them in a very neutral, non-defensive mood. Contrary to what you might read or be told, when you smoke bees, you're actually putting them in a, oh my God, the hive's on fire. So that's what they start trying to gather honey or whatever they can and get out because they're in a state of panic. I'm trying very hard to get to a place where I don't even have to use smoke. I've experimented with various things like peppermint oil. The bees don't dig it. If you want to keep them off your person, peppermint oil is a great way to do that. The other thing, though, that more than anything, pay attention to the bees. The bees will kind of let you know their mood for the day. Today, it's beautiful. It's about a perfect 80 degrees. There's hardly any humidity. It's a nice, cool breeze blowing. Today would be a fabulous day to get into the bees and work with them. If it's real hot and muggy or there's inclement weather on the way, I would say don't even mess with them. But even moreover, pay attention to your bees. They'll let you know because I believe they actually are aware of the fact that one sting is the end for them. They'll bump your chest. They'll pop you and kind of like, hey, what are you doing, buddy? Back up, get away from my house, before they really give it to you. And even then, they may not give you a full-on sting where it actually leaves their stinger in you, pumping venom into the sting area. I've been stung many times in my messing around with them. But what I have learned is that honeybees overall are not aggressive. I did have one colony, our biggest, strongest colony, that as it got stronger and stronger was less willing to put up with my antics. And so, especially when it came time for honey taking, man, that was interesting because I had bees all over me and they were desperately trying to sting me in the face. And any little hole in the armor, so to speak, if you have a suit that had a hole in it like I did, and the shoulder, I had a bee get in underneath there and work her way all the way to my skin so that she could sting me. They're not stupid creatures, and they're not just like, even bugs have more intelligence and more consciousness than I think a lot of us would be willing to believe even. But so what I have now is I have a wild swarm that has taken up residence in my box behind me. And I'm going to give these guys a good month in that box because at the end of it all, I have a new horizontal hive that I built based on the design of Fyodor Lautzen in the book. But what we did is we actually downloaded the plans from the editor of the book site. And the editor's name is Leo Sharashkin. I'm sure I'd jack that up too. And that site is horizontalhive.com. Now, I'm going to tell you something about that. It's a fabulous site. He has tons of really well done plans, really detailed information, and Dr. Leo himself is a hell of a beekeeper. I have a beef with with some of their plans. And my beef is they do not make it clear. And I actually emailed Dr. Leo about this, and he came back and said that, he actually told us that there's a difference. And I went back through the plans, and there's nowhere in his plans. He calls his setup a Layens, Layens, Layens hive. That's exactly what Lautzen's design is based off of, is a Layens hive. And then what it amounts to in Lautzen's design is one deep frame, which would be called a hive body frame, and one honey super frame actually put together end to end. If you want to actually get a visual of that, there's a great amount of videos out there. Or I would first of all, I would highly recommend the book. It's everything is in the book, including plans, which I should have followed from the book. But what we did is we bought material enough for 3 hives, only to realize that Dr. Leo's Layens hive uses a different frame size than Theodore Lautzen's Layens hive. So they're not actually both Layens hive, and you know, whatever. Now, Dr. Leo has ways to how to turn your current frames into his Layens style frames, but it's a lot of bullshit is what it is, and I'm not willing to do it. So we figured out a solution that will work for a single hive. But moving forward, I'm going to bite the bullet and get wood again, which the first round cost us nearly $300 because lumber prices are so retardedly high right now, that we decided, you know, we're going to sell the other ones that we have, and then we'll build one that uses the bigger frame so we don't have to cut all of our frames. I have, I don't know, probably 50 or so frames that I can work with, and it seems foolish to cut them all down. Not to mention, if you have a conventional honey extractor, they won't fit. So, you know, there are some issues that come along with this, but in my opinion, the benefits of keeping bees in a more natural way. And when we get this, when I get ready to move this hive into its new structure, I'll video all of that so that you can get an idea. According to the book, what I went from, you know, getting in about 2 hours at least every couple of weeks or so to each individual hive, and a good amount of money in dealing with various pests. I will not have but 2 hours a year into inspecting my bees in the spring and the fall, and extracting honey. And so I'm super excited about the prospect of that, to see just how that works here in our own setting. Theodore, in his book, claims to have, well, he showed pictures of at least 25 different hives he has in his apiary, and he said he puts a grand total of about 4 hours a year into servicing them. That's unbelievable. I mean, anyone that keeps bees in the traditional setup has got to be going, what? That doesn't even make sense. And it's because he only goes in the spring, just basically to take a look at them, to change out any frames that need to be changed out, to add any foundation that needs to, so that they can expand, and to make sure that, you know, everybody is laying, you know, or the queen is laying, and that the queen is present. There's no queen excluder. There's no keeping the queen from specific areas like there is in the Langstroth setup. The Langstroth setup is honestly a pretty complicated way to keep bees, and it's not my forte, because I'm not a complicated guy, man. I don't want to I have so many other things going on. I don't want to fuss. And maybe that's, you know, part of my own problems in life. Who knows? But I'm not going to go into that. I want to keep bees because I want to have bees on my homestead. And honey is a bonus. I want honey. Clearly, I want honey. I love honey. But I want what we're doing here to make sense cohesively as one complete unit. And so we're going to give Theodore's setup a shot, and you know, chronicle that. I really hope to that this swarm has a queen, and I won't know that until we get into it. Not every swarm does, but if they don't, that's not a big deal. I can and I will purchase a queen if I have to, or I will at least, but I'll try to do that locally. There is a beekeeping club here locally that has quite a few members, and I'm sure I can get a hold of someone in that setup who can get me a queen, and if all else fails, well, then I'll buy one. But, you know, which I guess would be good video material. But anyway, The specifics of this trap, and I've used this trap now 2 seasons in a row, and it worked. Actually, I caught 2 swarms in it last year, and this is the first of this year. It's late already this year. Our first swarm last year came in the early parts of April, but everything has been quite a bit behind this year. It's been a lot cooler than normal, and it just seemed like spring took a lot longer to get going than it did in the past years that we've been here. So it's May 1st today. This is the first day of May, which this is like nearly these next 2 weeks typically our peak swarm season, but it may be the entire month is when it peaks. So I'm hopefully I can catch one more, or get in touch with somebody who has a swarm that needs to be caught, because I have frames ready to go in a place that they can go into. Now, this actual trap could house these bees for most of the summer, honestly, because the frames are very large that are in there. They already have comb. These bees can go right into production, and that's really what is of critical importance when it comes time for catching swarms. So the general rule of thumb is for every pound of comb, wax comb that the bees have to make, that's 8 pounds of honey production lost. So if you have to demolish your combs every year to extract your honey, well, like you're really cutting down how much honey you're going to get from your hive the next year around. So this particular setup hopefully will allow us to keep our comb intact. It's going to require a little bit of engineering on an extractor to get it, but that's okay. We'll figure that out. But the interior setup of this, it'll hold 8 frames. Oh, I've got a little troll that's awake over there. It'll hold 8 frames. There's 6 in it. So if I have to, I can drop 2 more frames in. The primary deal though is the lemongrass oil. That is what attracts them. And I'll get you a close-up more of these bees are not in a state of assault. Like I said, most of these bees are they're just kind of moving in. So I'm not going to worry too much about them. I'm not going to get right in their flyway. That's another no-no. Like just kind of give them their space and they'll give you theirs. But this is mounted to the board. It really is just sitting right on top of it, on top of the railroad tie. I did shoot a screw in the side of it just to hold it in place. But the bottom of it is screen, and that screen creates the draft, which carries your scent of lemongrass on the wind. The top that is just metal put on there and stapled on, and then you can pop the top off and access your frames. And what I'll have to do is when it comes time to transfer this, I'll get on a ladder. I'll put a little piece of screen over the entrance of this hive, and then I'll take it off. Just carry it down the ladder. So, or at least that's the theory. That's what I did last year. So this is really exciting. I was kind of bummed out. I didn't think that we were going to catch anything because it was gotten so late into the season. I hadn't even seen a honeybee until yesterday on the property. So I was really feeling kind of bummed out. But as it turns out, every day is a new chance. So, as not to drag this thing on too far, the next part of this, I'll label this part 1. The next part of this will be moving them in and showing you how that goes and kind of chronicling the progress of it. So if you like this content, please hit like and subscribe and share with others. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to use comments. I'll get back to you. I love to interact, and we'll see you on the next one.